I've often thought that general elections are called general elections because they generally pan out in much the same way. In the run up to an election, the incumbent government will suddenly and miraculously find a few £1 billion down the back of the sofa at number 10 Downing Street. Armed with that newfound wealth, they promise to spend more on schools and hospitals to ensure that the nation is both educated and healthy. They promise to spend more on both the road and rail network so we can all get about easily in order to make our own individual contributions to the national coffers. Over the course of 3.5 decades, almost all the elections I have reported on have played out in precisely the same way. Give us one more chance and we'll do all the things that we promised to do. Honest. However, the last one didn't follow that well-trodden and time-proven path. There were no promises of increases in expenditure. Rishi Sunak and his pals merely trotted out the same old rhetoric about stopping the small boats. Perhaps if he had revealed the true state of the nation's finances, the small boats might have taken themselves somewhere a little bit more affluent instead. But he didn't. In fact, it wasn't until Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves took to her feet in the House of Commons yesterday that we found out just how skint we really are as a nation. Rachel Reeves spoke for almost half an hour to explain the financial black hole that she and her colleagues have inherited. I'm not going to play you all of what she said. I'm merely going to give you the highlights, or maybe that should be lowlights, as they pertain to the construction industry.
The government published its plans for day-to-day spending in the spring budget in March. But when I arrived at the Treasury, on the very first day, I was alerted by officials that this was not how much the previous government expected to spend this year. It wasn't even close. In fact, the total pressures on these budgets across a range of areas was an additional £35 billion. Once you account for the slippage in budgets you usually see over a year and the reserve of £9 billion designed to respond to genuinely unexpected events, it means, Mr. Speaker, that we have inherited a projected overspend of £22 billion. Mr. Speaker, the previous government claimed it was levelling up the country. It made promise after promise to the British people. But the spending audit has uncovered that some of those commitments weren't worth the paper that they were written on. So my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, will undertake a thorough review of these commitments. As part of that work, she has agreed not to move forwards with projects that the previous government refused to publicly cancel, despite knowing full well that they were unaffordable. That includes proposed work on the A303 and the A27. And my right honourable friend will also cancel the Restoring Our Railway programme, saving £85 million next year, with individual projects to be assessed through her review. In October 2020, the government announced that 40 new hospitals would be built by 2030. Since then, only one new project has opened to patients, and only 6 have started their main construction activity. The National Audit Office were clear that delivery was wildly off track. But since coming into office, it has become clear that the previous government continued to maintain its commitment to 40 hospitals without anywhere close to the funding required to deliver them. The inheritance from the previous government is unforgivable. After the chaos of Partygate, when they knew trust in politics was at an all-time low, they gave false hope to Britain. When people were already being hurt by their cost of living crisis, they promised solutions that they knew could never be paid for. Roads that would never be built, public transport that would never arrive, hospitals that would never treat a single patient. They spent like there was no tomorrow because they knew that someone else would pick up the bill.
Now, let me start by saying that while I am left-leaning, I have no trust or faith in any politician, regardless of what side of the house they're occupying. But there's an important thing to consider in what Rachel Reeves was saying. Despite being granted key worker status, construction was very, very hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. The 40 hospitals we were promised during the last government failed to materialise. The spend on roads and the railways has already been limited and curtailed, and construction has seen record numbers of liquidations right across the entire sector. Rachel Reeves' speech yesterday didn't just confirm that the good ship UK was sinking. She said that there would be no rescue ships for quite some considerable time. Anyone pinning their hopes on some splurge spending on schools, roads, railways, just had their hopes dashed. Now, I know what you're thinking. In the run-up to the election, the Labour Party pledged to build 1.5 million new homes. Now, given that those won't actually be paid for by the government, maybe the house building sector will once again be the industry's saviour. It would be nice to think so. However, there is a problem. In order to meet that Labour Party pledge, the nation's house builders will have to build houses at a faster rate than ever before. In fact, they will have to build houses at roughly twice the rate that they're currently building them today. Is that even possible? In all the years I've been writing about construction, the sector has never once hit its house building targets. There's nothing to suggest that will change anytime soon. The planning system is broken. We refuse to convert desolate and deserted shopping centres and high streets for housing. We can't figure out what's green belt and what's brown belt, and we don't have enough people to match the current demand, let alone a demand that is double what we're doing today. Sadly, if you or your company was sat on its hands hoping for a post-election resurgence, I'm afraid you may have to wait a little bit longer.